Imagine a country that has it all. More oil than Saudi Arabia. More natural beauty than you can comprehend. A place where, just a few decades ago, the middle class flew to Miami just to do their weekend shopping. They called it Saudi Venezuela. It was the envy of South America, the richest nation on the continent. A beacon of democracy in a sea of instability. Fast forward to today. That same country is a graveyard of ambition. The currency is worth less than the paper it is printed on. People, former lawyers, engineers, teachers, are scavenging through garbage trucks just to find a half-eaten scrap of bread. Hospitals have no electricity. Pharmacies have no medicine. Millions have fled, walking thousands of miles on foot, just to escape the starvation. How does this happen? How does a nation sitting on the largest lottery win in geological history simply collapse? They tell you it was bad luck. They tell you it was the oil prices. They tell you it was foreign enemies. But they are lying. This was not an accident. This was a process. A calculated, systematic dismantling of an economy. It is a blueprint. And if you look closely at the global economy today, if you look at the debt, the printing presses, the populism, you might start to see the same cracks forming in your own backyard. This is the story of how to bankrupt a country in 5 easy steps. This is the tragedy of Venezuela. Before we descend into this economic nightmare, I need you to do something for me. If you want to understand the hidden mechanics of the global economy, if you want to see the future before it hits your bank account, then you need to be part of this community. Hit that subscribe button right now. Like this video to help us spread this truth. And leave a comment below. Do you think your country is safe from what happened in Venezuela? Let's find out. To understand the fall, we have to understand the height. You cannot appreciate the crash unless you see how high they were flying. In the 1950s and 60s and 70s, Venezuela was dazzling. It had the highest standard of living in Latin America. The currency, the bolivar, was so strong it was known as the Latin American dollar. Foreign workers flocked there, not the other way around. Americans went to Venezuela to work in the oil fields. Europeans went there to start businesses. It was a paradise of consumption. But underneath the glitter of the skyscrapers in Caracas, underneath the endless flow of expensive scotch and imported cars, there was a poison growing. The poison was oil. You see, when a country discovers a massive amount of resources, something strange happens to its psychology. It forgets how to work. It forgets how to build. It forgets how to innovate. Why build a factory when you can just dig money out of the ground? Why farm the land when you can import food with petrodollars? This is called the resource curse. And Venezuela had it bad. By the 1990s, the party was starting to slow down. Oil prices fluctuated. The gap between the ultra-rich and the poor began to widen into a canyon. The corruption in the traditional political parties was rampant. The people were angry. They felt left behind. They looked at the oil wealth and asked, "Where is my share? Why am I poor if my country is rich?" It is a fair question. And it is the most dangerous question in the world if the wrong person answers it. Enter Hugo Chavez. 1998. He was charismatic. He was a former military man. He was a firebrand speaker who could stand on a stage for 6 hours and hold the crowd in the palm of his hand. He didn't speak like a politician. He spoke like a savior. He told the people exactly what they wanted to hear. He said the system was rigged. He said the rich stole the wealth. He said, "Give me the power and I will give you the oil." It sounds familiar, doesn't it? It is the eternal seduction of populism. Vote for me, and I will fix everything. Vote for me, and you won't have to struggle anymore. The people believed him. They elected him in a landslide. And for a while, it looked like he was right. This is the trap. This is why the road to hell is so seductive. Because the first few miles are paved with gold. When Chavez took power, luck was on his side. Oil prices began a historic climb. from roughly $10 a barrel to over $100 a barrel. It was a tsunami of cash. Trillions of dollars flooded into the Venezuelan treasury. And Chavez spent it. He didn't invest it in infrastructure. He didn't build a sovereign wealth fund like Norway to save for a rainy day. No. He spent it on the missions. Free housing, free health care, subsidized food, cash handouts. He reduced poverty statistics practically overnight. People had televisions. They had full fridges. They worshipped him. They put his picture on their walls next to Jesus Christ. He was the hero who finally shared the wealth. But he wasn't building an economy. He was running a charity shop. And he was funding it with a credit card that had no limit, or so he thought. But spending money wasn't enough for Chavez. He wanted control. And this brings us to the first real step of the destruction. Step 1. The war on production. You see, Chavez didn't trust the private sector. He believed that business owners were greedy predators. So he decided that the state, the government, could run businesses better than businessmen. He began a campaign of expropriation. That is a fancy word for theft. He would go on his weekly television show, Allo Presidente. He would walk through the streets of Caracas. He would point at a building, a warehouse, a factory, a farm, and he would ask, "Who owns this?" His aides would say, "A private family, Mr. President." And he would shout, "Expropriate, expropriate it, seize it," just like that. On live TV, years of hard work, generations of family legacy, gone in a second. The crowd would cheer. They loved seeing the greedy rich get punished. It felt like justice. But it wasn't justice. It was suicide. Because here is the thing about governments. Bureaucrats do not know how to run factories. Soldiers do not know how to run farms. Political loyalists do not know how to manage supply chains. When the government took over the steel mills, production collapsed. When they took over the cement plants, construction stopped. When they took over the farms, millions of acres of productive land, the tractors rusted in the fields. The cattle were eaten or stolen. The sugar plantations went wild. Venezuela, a country with incredibly fertile land, started importing everything. They stopped producing milk. They stopped producing meat. They stopped producing coffee. Why produce when the government might steal your business tomorrow? Investment dried up. Who in their right mind would build a factory in Venezuela? The smart money left. The talented managers left. But the party kept going. Because the oil was still flowing. The money masked the rot. They were destroying the engine of the country, but the car was still rolling downhill. They didn't realize they had cut the brakes. And this was just the beginning. Because once you destroy production, you have a new problem. Prices start to rise. When you produce less, things get more expensive. Basic economics. Supply and demand. But dictators do not like economics. They think they can pass a law to repeal the laws of mathematics. So Chavez did what every economic illiterate does in history. He tried to control the prices. And that brings us to Step 2. Step 2. The price control trap. Imagine you are a baker. It costs you 50 cents to bake a loaf of bread. Flour, yeast, electricity, labor. You sell it for 70 cents. You make a small profit. You feed your family. The system works. But then, inflation starts to creep up because the government is spending too much. The price of bread goes to 80 cents. The people complain. "We are hungry," they shout. "The bakers are ripping us off." So the government steps in. The president goes on TV and says, "The greedy bakers are enemies of the people. From now on, the price of bread is fixed at 20 cents. The crowd cheers again. Cheap bread. Victory for the working class. But you, the baker, you have a problem. It still costs you 50 cents to make the bread. If you sell it for 20 cents, you lose 30 cents on every loaf. The more you bake, the more money you lose. You are not a charity. You will go bankrupt in a week. So, what do? You stop baking bread. It's not a conspiracy. It's survival. The next day, the shelves are empty. There is no bread at 20 cents. There is no bread at 70 cents. There is no bread at all. This happened to everything in Venezuela. Milk, eggs, toilet paper, soap, medicines. The government set fair prices for everything, and everything disappeared. The supermarkets, which used to be full of American and European products, turned into empty caverns. People started queuing at 4 a.m., just hoping a truck would arrive. They developed a tracking system. WhatsApp groups buzzing, "Hey, the supermarket in the east has milk." And thousands of people would run. A stampede for basic dignity. But the government didn't admit they were wrong. No. They doubled down. They said the emptiness was a plot. They accused business owners of hoarding. They sent the military to inspect warehouses. They arrested store managers for economic sabotage. They seized the inventory and gave it away. But once that inventory was gone, no new inventory came. You can confiscate a loaf of bread once, but you cannot confiscate the will to bake it. The economy was grinding to a halt. But there was one thing that was still working. One giant heart pumping blood into this dying body. PDVSA, Petróleos de Venezuela, S.A., the state oil company. It was the goose that laid the golden eggs. It was one of the best-run oil companies in the world. Efficient, technical, professional. It brought in 95% of the country's dollars. As long as PDVSA worked, the revolution could survive. So, what did they do? They killed it. This is step 3, the purge of competence. In the early 2000s, the workers at PDVSA saw what was happening. They went on strike. They protested the politicization of their company. Chavez didn't negotiate. He took a whistle. He went on national television. And he blew the whistle. He fired 18,000 employees. 18,000. Not the janitors. Not the secretaries. He fired the geologists, the petroleum engineers, the managers with 30 years of experience, the brains of the operation. He called them traitors, and he replaced them with loyalists, people who knew nothing about oil, but everything about politics. They wore red shirts. They chanted the slogans. But they didn't know how to maintain a refinery. They stopped reinvesting in the equipment. They stopped exploring for new wells. They took every cent of profit and siphoned it off to social programs and into their own pockets. Accidents started happening. Explosions in refineries. Oil spills. Production began to drop. Slowly at first. Then faster. Venezuela sits on the largest oil reserves in the world. Bigger than Saudi Arabia. But today, they can barely pump enough to keep the lights on in Caracas. They actually have to import gasoline from Iran. Let that sink in. An oil superpower that has to import gas. It is like a fish dying of thirst in the ocean. But while the oil industry was dying, a new industry was booming. Corruption. This brings us to step 4, the currency scam. This is a bit technical, but you need to understand it because it is the greatest theft in the history of Latin America. The government controlled the dollars. If you wanted to import medicine, or tires, or food, you needed dollars to pay the foreign suppliers. You couldn't just go to the bank and buy dollars. You had to ask the government. The government set an official exchange rate. Let's say, 10 bolivars for $1. But on the black market, the real market, nobody wanted bolivars. On the street, $1 cost 100 bolivars. Do you see the gap? 10 versus 100. Now, imagine you are a friend of the government. A oligarch. You go to the government agency. You say, I need $1 million to import, powdered milk for the children. They give you $1 million at the official rate. You pay 10 million bolivars. Now you have $1 million in your US bank account. Do you buy the milk? Maybe you buy a little bit, just to show some paperwork. But mostly, you take that $1 million. You sell it on the black market for 100 bolivars each. You now have 100 million bolivars. You pay back the 10 million you borrowed. And you keep 90 million bolivars in pure, risk-free profit. You didn't produce anything. You didn't build anything. You just exploited the spread. Billions and billions of dollars vanished this way. Phantom imports. Empty containers arriving at ports. Companies that existed only on paper. The government officials knew. They were in on it. They were the ones signing the checks. While the people were fighting for pasta, the elite were buying private jets and condos in Madrid. The treasury was being drained from the inside out. It was a vampire state, sucking the blood of its own future. And then, the inevitable happened. The luck ran out. 2013. Chavez dies of cancer. And shortly after, the oil price crashed. From $100 down to $50. Down to $30. The tsunami of cash evaporated. The music stopped. But the spending couldn't stop. The government had millions of people depending on free food and handouts. They had a massive bloated bureaucracy to pay. They had stolen everything else. There was no savings. There was no production. There was no private sector left to tax. There was only a gaping hole in the budget. So, Nicolas Maduro, the new president, looked at the problem. He looked at the empty vault. And he looked at the printing press. And he made the decision that sealed the doom of the nation. He said, print. Step 5. The death of money. He said, print. This is step 5. The death of money. When a government spends more than it earns, it has a deficit. Usually, it borrows money to fill the gap. But nobody wanted to lend money to Venezuela anymore. They had defaulted on their debts. They were a pariah. So they turned to the central bank. In a normal country, the central bank is independent. It says no to the president. It protects the value of the currency. But in Venezuela, the central bank was just another office of the revolution. They started printing bolivars. Not just a few. Trillions. Quadrillions. They added zeros to the bills. Then they printed new bills. Then they renamed the currency and printed new bills again. Imagine a game of Monopoly where the banker keeps handing out unlimited cash to everyone. Suddenly, Boardwalk costs $400 billion. That is hyperinflation. In 2018, inflation hit 1 million %. 1 million %. Do you understand what that means? It means if you had your life savings in the bank, say, enough to buy a house, by the end of the year, that money couldn't even buy a cup of coffee. Prices changed every day. Then every hour. Supermarkets stopped putting price tags on items because the price would change by the time you walked to the register. People started carrying backpacks full of cash just to buy lunch. Then they stopped counting the money. They started weighing it. Give me 2 kilos of cash for a kilo of cheese. It was madness. Money is trust. It is a promise that this piece of paper is worth something. When that trust breaks, civilization breaks. Society reverted to the Stone Age. Barter returned. A haircut for a bag of rice. A taxi ride for a carton of eggs. People began to burn money for heat because the paper was worth less than the firewood. Artists started painting on the banknotes because the canvas was too expensive. They wove purses out of the currency. The bolivar, once the Latin American dollar, was now trash. Literally trash. You could find piles of it in the gutters. But the government didn't stop. They kept raising the minimum wage. We are raising the wage by 3,000%. Maduro would shout. But it didn't matter. If you raise wages by 3,000% but prices go up by 5,000%, you are poorer. The math always wins. And this is where the tragedy turns into a horror movie. Because you can't eat printed paper. Step 6. The humanitarian catastrophe. This is the part that keeps me up at night. The statistics are one thing. The reality is another. When the economy collapsed, the food supply chain shattered. 75% of the population lost weight involuntarily. They called it the Maduro diet. The average Venezuelan lost 19 pounds in 2016. But that's just a number. Here is the image. Mothers boiling water with limestone just to give their children something white that looked like milk to trick their bellies. Fathers scavenging in the garbage trucks outside of restaurants, fighting with vultures for rotten meat. And it wasn't just the poor. It was the middle class. Professors, doctors, reduced to beggars. In the zoos, the animals started disappearing. First the buffalo, then the wild pigs. People broke in and ate them. The zoo animals that remained starved to death in their cages. Lions looking like skeletons. A mirror of the nation. Then came the healthcare collapse. Venezuela used to have some of the best hospitals in the region. Now, they became death traps. No antibiotics. No alcohol. No gloves. Surgeons washing their hands with soda water. Incubators for premature babies lined up with no electricity, cold and silent. Women giving birth in waiting rooms on the floor. Diseases that had been eradicated decades ago returned. Malaria, diphtheria, measles, spreading like wildfire because there were no vaccines. And through all of this, the government did one thing. They lied. They stopped publishing health statistics. They stopped publishing inflation numbers. If we don't count the dead, they don't exist, right? They blocked humanitarian aid. When countries tried to send food and medicine, Maduro blocked the bridges with shipping containers. He said, "We are not beggars. This aid is a Trojan horse for an American invasion." He let his own people starve rather than admit failure. This is the ultimate stage of the bankruptcy. Moral bankruptcy. When the ideology becomes more important than human life. But wait. I can hear some of you typing the comment already. But what about the sanctions? The US crushed them. It's not socialism, it's imperialism. We have to address this, because it is the favorite shield of the regime. Let's look at the timeline. Facts matter. The economy began to collapse in 2014. Shortages were rampant in 2015. Hunger was widespread in 2016. The massive, crushing oil sanctions from the US? They didn't arrive until 2019. Did the sanctions help? No. Did they make it harder for the government to move money? Yes. But saying sanctions caused the Venezuela collapse is like pushing a man off a cliff, watching him hit the ground, and then shooting the corpse, and blaming the bullet for the death. The patient was already terminal. The sanctions were just the final nail in the coffin. The destruction was homegrown. It was made in Venezuela, by Venezuelan policies. But the regime used the sanctions brilliantly. They became the perfect scapegoat. Why is there no medicine? The empire blocked us. Why is there no food? The economic war. It allowed them to wash their hands of the blood. And while the people starved, the country began to empty. The Exodus. This is the largest refugee crisis in the history of the Western Hemisphere. Bigger than Syria. Bigger than Ukraine. Nearly 8 million Venezuelans have fled. That is 25% of the population. Imagine if 80 million Americans just left. Walked away. They walked across the Andes Mountains in freezing temperatures, wearing flip-flops, carrying their children on their backs. They walked to Colombia, to Peru, to Chile. They walked through the Darien Gap, one of the most dangerous jungles on Earth, trying to reach the USA. They left everything behind. Their homes, their histories, just to survive. And what did the government say? Good riddance. Let the traitors go. Because fewer people meant fewer mouths to feed. And the ones who left started sending money back. Remittances. Dollars. Ironically, The people who fled the system ended up saving the people who stayed. The government eventually tacitly accepted the US dollar, after demonizing it for 20 years. After jailing people for using it, Maduro went on TV and said, "Thank God for the dollar," because the bolivar was dead. Today, if you go to a store in Caracas, you pay in dollars. But it is a twisted economy. It is a bubble. There is a tiny elite, maybe 3% of the population, who live in a bubble of luxury. They have Ferrari dealerships. They have gourmet restaurants. They have casinos. And right outside the glass walls of that bubble, there is 90% poverty. It is a cyberpunk dystopia. High-tech luxury for the few. High-tech misery for the many. So, we have seen the 5 steps. Attack production. Control prices. Purge competence. Institutionalized corruption. Destroy the currency. It is a perfect recipe. But why does this matter to you? Why should you, sitting in the US, or Europe, or India, care about a failed state in the Caribbean? Because the virus doesn't stay contained. And the symptoms are starting to show up everywhere. Look at the debt in the Western world. Look at the deficits. Look at the calls for price controls on food. Look at the demonization of profit. Look at the printing of money. The scale is different. The speed is different. But the mechanics are exactly the same. Gravity works the same way in Caracas as it does in London or New York. If you jump off the building, you will fall. Venezuela is the warning sign. It is the ghost of Christmas future. But there is one final chapter to this story, the most dangerous one. Because when a country goes bankrupt, it doesn't just disappear. It becomes something else. It becomes a playground for the world's worst actors. It becomes a zombie state. When the money runs out, sovereignty is on sale. Venezuela needed cash. Desperately. China lent them $60 billion. Russia lent them billions more for weapons. Iran sent tankers of gasoline. But these loans are not charity. They are leverage. Venezuela is now effectively a vassal. Fate. China owns a huge chunk of future oil production. Russia owns key assets in the energy sector. Iran uses Venezuela as a strategic beachhead in the Americas. We are talking about a Russian ally, with massive oil reserves. A 3-hour flight from Miami. Do you see the geopolitical nightmare? The bankruptcy of Venezuela didn't just hurt Venezuelans. It destabilized the entire region. It handed a key strategic asset over to the rivals of the West. Terrorist groups like the ELN and FARC from Colombia now operate openly in Venezuela. They control the gold mines in the south. And this is the Ark of Mining, a lawless zone in the Amazon jungle, where gangs force indigenous people to mine for gold in toxic pits full of mercury. This gold is flown out on private planes, sold in Turkey or the UAE, and the cash comes back to prop up the regime. It is a criminal enterprise masquerading as a government. They don't need the economy to work anymore. They don't need the people to be happy. They just need the gold, the drugs, and the oil. They have sanction-proofed their power. And this brings us to the terrifying realization. The collapse has stabilized. The patient died, but the zombie is walking. Maduro is still in power. The opposition has been crushed, exiled, or jailed. The protests have stopped because people are too tired, too hungry, or too scared to march. The world has moved on to the next crisis. Ukraine, Gaza. Venezuela is old news. But it shouldn't be. Because the lesson of Venezuela is not just about economics. It is about fragility. We think our systems are robust. We think, it can't happen here. We are too rich. We are too democratic. We have checks and balances. Venezuela had checks and balances. Venezuela had a constitution. Venezuela was the richest country in the region. It took less than 20 years to turn it into a wasteland. It happens slowly. Then it happens all at once. It starts with a promise of free money. It starts with blaming the greedy for the problems of the poor. It starts with printing a little bit of cash to cover a small deficit. It feels good at first. It feels like justice. But the laws of economics are like the laws of physics. You can ignore them for a while, but eventually the bill comes due. And in Venezuela, the bill was paid in blood, in lost generations, in families torn apart. I want you to look at your own country. Look at the political rhetoric. Are they promising things that cannot be paid for? Are they attacking the producers? Are they diluting the currency? Are they politicizing the institutions? If the answer is yes, then you are on step 1, or maybe step 2. The slide has begun. And once the slide starts, it is incredibly hard to stop. But there is hope, because we have the blueprint. We know how they did it, which means we know how to avoid it. We know that sound money matters. We know that property rights matter. We know that checks and balances are not just bureaucratic red tape, they are the levees that hold back the flood. Venezuela is a tragedy, but it is also a gift. A terrible, painful gift of knowledge. They paid the price so we could learn the lesson. The question is, are we learning? Or are we blindly walking down the same path, distracted by our phones, while the ground beneath us begins to crumble? The story of Venezuela is a story of human potential wasted. It is a reminder that civilization is fragile. It is not a guarantee. It is a garden that must be tended. If you let the weeds of corruption and populism grow, if you poison the soil with bad economics, the garden dies, and it becomes a jungle. A jungle where the strong eat the weak, where the law is the gun, where the future is just a struggle to survive the day. Don't take your stability for granted. Don't take your currency for granted. Defend the truth. Demand fiscal responsibility. Because the alternative is not just a recession. The alternative is Venezuela. Now, I want to leave you with a final thought. A challenge. Look at the money in your wallet. Really look at it. It's paper. Or it's digits on a screen. Its value exists only because we agree it exists. If that agreement breaks, if the trust vanishes, what do you have left? Do you have skills? Do you have community? Do you have real assets? Or are you entirely dependent on a system that could disappear in the blink of an eye? History is a wheel. Empires rise and fall. Currencies are born and they die. Venezuela is not an anomaly. It is a recurrence. It has happened in Rome. It has happened in Weimar Germany. It has happened in Zimbabwe. It happened in Venezuela. And it will happen again. The only variable is where and when. Cinematic visual. The camera pulls back from a drone shot of the Caracas skyline. The skyscrapers stand tall, but half the lights are out. The city looks beautiful but haunted. The music swells, a melancholic cello mixed with a deep, ominous bass drone. We study history not to mourn the past, but to arm ourselves for the future. This battle for economic truth is the most important battle of our time, and you are now part of it. You have the knowledge. You have the map. Don't let them bankrupt your future. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about the truth. If you found value in this deep dive, if you want to understand the machinery of the world so you don't get crushed by it, then you know what to do. Join us. The journey is just beginning. I'll see you in the next video.